Hello there. Welcome to another episode of Behaviour Change on Horizon TV. I'm your guest and host, Zannelle. I am a wellness coach, mental health advocate, and former counseling psychologist at Nafsi Wellness. And today we are going to be talking about therapy or counseling. Now, I know in previous episodes we've talked about different ways you can uphold your mental health. We've talked about listening skills, we've talked about communication skills, we've talked about self-awareness and such and such. If you haven't been able to see those videos, please go back to the YouTube channel and check those out. Now today we're going to be looking at therapy, which is one of the ways in which you can use a session to better your mental health. Now I know you've heard of therapy here and there, possibly in entertainment, possibly on your TV, possibly through this YouTube video, and you've possibly had the phrases mental health practitioner, therapist, counselor, counseling psychologist, psychiatrist, all of which center around creating or bettering mental health or dealing with mental health conditions. Now today we are going to be deconstructing therapy. I'll be using a lot of layman's language so that you, even if you haven't had prior exposure to therapy and what it entails, that you can at least have an idea of what that is. And if you have any questions, that's why the comment section is there. All right, let's get started. So when you're talking about therapy, obviously it involves a therapist or counselor, counseling psychologist or psychiatrist. I'll use all of these titles interchangeably, even though they are different, because they do show the different levels of learning, right? So I will define them later on in the video as it goes forward, but just know that once I mention all of those titles, it just means that these are individuals that have taken time to learn about the field of mental health and the mind and how to better it, the mental illnesses that are involved, coping strategies, basically everything brain and mind. All right. So when you're talking about therapy usually involves a therapist and a client. Now a therapist, I've already explained, is someone who is trained in psychology from either a diploma level, a degree level, master's level, or a PhD, right? And when you're talking about the client, this is anyone who is referred to the therapist or anyone who approaches a therapist to seek out treatment or to seek out wellness or to seek out just any form of mental health wellness or solutions or assessment for psychological issues, right? This is someone who approaches a practitioner for aid. Now, you could be a client. A client can be a single individual. It can be couples who are seeking a space or a mediator to moderate the issues within their relationship. It can also be a family. So a client doesn't necessarily have to be a single individual. In terms of group therapy, we can have a group anywhere from 3 to 10 people in a therapy session with a therapist. And these 10 individuals are individuals who have come seeking for services pertaining to one issue. When you talk about group therapy, it can involve issues such as addiction, where individuals who are battling some form of addiction, be it substance or gambling, one or the other, come together and they seek out community together, because sometimes approaching an individual one-to-one to seek help can seem too intimidating, and therefore knowing that there are other individuals who are going through the same thing that you're going through and are also seeking aid gives that form of support and comfort in that you're not alone in what you're going through. Okay, so we've talked about the therapist, we've talked about the client. Now let's talk about the environment. When it comes to therapy, it means vulnerability, it means safety, it means confidentiality. And what confidentiality means is that the things that are discussed within the session are kept secret between the client and the therapist. Now, there are limits to therapy, of course. These limits are issues like if you as the client say that you want to harm yourself, or you want to harm other people, or you have plans to harm other people or other people's property, then ethically the therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor is obligated to reach out to the law or any other person in authority to ensure that that harm or that plan does not come to fruition, right? However, outside of those limitations, anything that is said within the session, it will be kept within the session, right? And this is to be able to foster a rapport. A rapport is sort of like a good relationship, almost like a friendship, because the issues to be discussed within the therapy sessions are very, very, very private, right? And that's why therapy is very important, because when it comes to therapy, you're basically intentionally deciding, let me sit down with this person and tell them about my problems or my issues or the things that I feel like I haven't been heard. Previously in our videos, we talked about communication and listening skills and how some of the times we aren't really taught how to listen. We're taught to hear. We aren't taught how to listen. And so when it comes to a therapy session, here you are with a practitioner who is the counselor or the psychologist or the psychiatrist, and they are taught how to be present, to pay attention to what you say, to pay attention to your body language, and basically be a sounding board for all that you are saying, to ensure that it is a safe space for you to talk all that you wish to talk, so that the therapist can understand and ask necessary questions, all leading up to whatever goal you have within therapy. Okay? So we've talked about the therapist, and we've talked about the client, and we've talked about the different types of therapy, which is individual, which is one-on-one. We've talked about group, which is 1 versus 3, 4, 5, 6, going upwards, depending on the type of therapy. We've talked about family therapy, which is the therapist and members of a family, where we mitigate conflict, allow for a safe space to communicate, create spaces where children can speak to their parents and parents can speak to their children as well. Build listening skills with regards to that, and open up the scenario for different perspective shifts, where the parents can see how their actions and how their words affect their children and vice versa. So basically allowing different perspectives to be seen within the safe space that is a therapy session. Now, we've also talked about couples therapy. There are many different reasons why couples can go for therapy. It can be as a result of miscommunication, frustration. Some of the things that you feel in your relationship are not heard, or if you feel some form of emotion that you feel has not been, there's like a buildup of emotion. That can be frustration, can be irritation, and there's no way for you to let it out. This would be the perfect session for you to learn how to dispose of those emotions, right? Okay, so there are those different types of therapy. Now let's talk about another reason for therapy, which is psychological assessments. Now, in previous videos, we talked about how therapy can work for different reasons. It can work for wellness, if you're just trying to improve how you cope with everyday stressors here and there. It can be if you're dealing with a mental health condition such as depression, anxiety, autism, cognitive disabilities as well. This is the space to now learn those coping mechanisms, as well as, because for some of these mental health conditions you could be on medication, and medication is advised to go along with therapy. So this is also the space to kind of talk about that and to take a practitioner through your journey with you to ensure that you're not alone in what you're feeling, right? But it is also a space for you to experience or to have psychological assessments taken. If you feel that you are suffering from depression, then a mental health practitioner, be it a counseling psychologist or a psychiatrist, can have can help you do those assessments, where you fill out a form, and based on those forms and the answers that you give, you're able to get an assessment on the type of mental health condition that you have. And these tests range as far as the number of mental health conditions there are. So if you feel that you are suffering from a mental health condition, rather than self-diagnose, because there's a lot of that going on, especially with the internet, and everyone feeling as though Google has the answer, and ChatGPT being everyone's therapist. So why not just get in touch with a therapist, preferably one at Nafsi Wellness. But yes, psychological assessment. Another reason is skill acquisition, and this is basically learning coping strategies, learning communication skills, learning listening skills, all of which can be taught during the mental health session or the therapy session. I lost my words there for a bit. So there are many different reasons why you can approach therapy, right? And trauma is one of them. Let's say, for example, you've experienced a tragic event that has altered how you behave. It has altered the way you think. It has altered your emotions, and it's inhibiting how you function on a daily basis. You're unable to do the things you once could before the event happened, and such and such. That's what we call a bit of what a traumatic event is. And traumatic events vary. It can be assault, it can be theft, it can be loss of a loved one, it can be loss of a job, it can be loss of valuables, it can be loss of a pet. You know, it just depends on what the experience is and if it's inhibiting your daily functioning, right? So it's up to you to reach out and let us know as well. Another reason people reach out is grief. Grief is very powerful. I think I've talked about it in other videos prior to this. Please have a look at those videos. If you are having a hard time coping with grief, therapy is a good place for you to go so that you can learn different ways and you can have someone to take on your journey. That is your therapist who is trained in this aspect to kind of just take you through the process and allow you a safe space to grieve. Yes, so we've talked about the role of the therapist, who the therapist can be, who the client can be. We've talked about what therapy caters to. Obviously, this is a very small portion. It's actually quite large. Feel free to go on the net and have a look-see. We've also talked about the services that are offered with regards to assessments, to mental health, to coping strategies, to talking. And just, you know, therapy doesn't have to be just solving issues. It can just be a safe space for you to talk to a therapist. So, and one thing about therapy si kama headache, like painkiller, headaches, ama Panadol, unaichukua tu seli unajisikia. Especially if you're dealing with like bad habits or you're dealing with trauma, I would encourage that once you get started in a therapy session, that you be consistent with how often you go for this therapy session and how often you show up for it. Because remember, these are habits. This is a mind, this is your brain actually. You're trying to rewire how your brain thinks, and this takes effort. It's not just a session that you can take that fixes everything. And another thing is that therapy is not it's not a fix-all type of tablet. It doesn't solve all the problems. It's just one part of a whole solution. And the whole other solution will be entirely up to you as the client, as the viewer, to put in effort to change that.